Howdy, my name is Frankie Jackson. Pronouns are they, them. I'm the coordinator in the LGBTQ plus Pride Center here at Texas A&M University in the offices of the Dean of Student Life. I'd like to start off by thanking our panelists, Sirloin and Natalie Taylor, and Fauna Fables, who will be joining us in just a little bit, for coming today and talking about the art of drag. So for some of you folks, you may be familiar with Sirloin and Fauna's work. They were in Draguland here in February, where we had an excellent time. But Natalie is actually joining us from New York State. So we wanted to bring a little bit of a change to one of these, so bringing in some New Yorkers. We are going to start off the panel with some introductions. Then I will have some questions, and then we'll have some audience questions. If you are with us here in the Zoom webinar, you can type those in the Q&A section and we can answer those, or you can send us those questions to us on Facebook. We are so excited. So for Natalie and Sirloin, if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about how you got involved with drag, what drag means to you. We actually wanted to start off by, if you could tell us a little bit about like the pronouns you use while you're in drag, because it is such a popular question.
Sure, I can go first. So my name is Natalie Taylor. I, out of drag, use he, him pronouns. In drag, I tend to use she, her, hers. I think that's a lot based on my presentation and my drag character. I tend to go for a specific look that I think people will instantly assume that. However, I've been called he, him in drag just from family members or friends that have been at a first time show, but I do prefer female pronouns while in drag. I got into drag through a friend who ended up becoming my drag mom. They performed at my undergrad institution for a drag show that we did every single year. And I always said I would never do it. I never thought that I would do drag. I just didn't think that I'd be good at it or what have you. And then I gave it a go one time when I was 20 years old, and I've been doing drag now for 5 years.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sirloin. I prefer he, him when I'm in drag. Out of drag, I can either go she, her, or I still like he, him some days when we just feel a little masculine. Yeah, I just started doing drag. This October will be my first year. I got started from going to a local drag show for my birthday last year, and just some local queens. They're so amazing. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do that. And you know, we tried that, but the whole like looking pretty as a girl thing, man, that's hard. And so that's how I looked into it. I actually found out about drag kings, and I just looked into it and I was like, wow, I think this seems really cool. So ever since then, it's just been super fun.
Awesome, thank you both. So I think for folks who aren't familiar, drag can seem like a lot of different things. And so I was wondering if y'all could define drag for us.
Sure. So the way I define drag personally, I think is different from what the world maybe views it as, because it can have so many definitions. For me, drag is blurring the gender line to create art. I actually heard a drag queen, Bob the Drag Queen, say that. And since that, I was like, that is how that definition, like that's how drag is to me. Like that's what I really want to portray. Because I think it goes past the binary norms of gender, and it really can be a self-expressive art, which I think is really amazing. And I think what I find really important about like the way I define drag is it's different for everybody. I think that needs to be stated, and I think that that's important. I don't think it has to have a specific term. I don't think it has to have a specific style. I think it can really be anything you want it to be, as long as you're happy when doing it. I always say I give credit to anybody who's going to go up on stage and perform in drag, because it's not easy, right? So I think that that's really a big part of my definition of drag as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I also think, you know, drag is kind of just gender expression, however you want to feel. And I love doing it. I love to just be creative with however I want to make the audience feel. I just want everyone to love that performance and get some, like, test the waters and just be free and do whatever you want to do. All drag is valid. I completely live by that. And that's what I've heard from all the great Houston Kings. And oh, it is so true. And yeah, it's just a huge performance. And I just want to make the audience feel good with me feeling good.
Howdy, Fauna. Like I said earlier, we are super excited to also be joined here by Fauna Fables. Fauna, we did some introductions, and so we were wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you got involved with drag, what drag means to you, and then we had a bit of a discussion about the pronouns people use in drag, because it's such a it's just a hot question. So if you could maybe start there. Fauna, can you hear us?
I can't currently hear anybody. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I can't hear any of you currently. I'm trying to figure that out right now.
Okay.
So give me just 1 second.
Yeah, so Fauna is having some technical difficulties right now. It is 2020 and Zoom is a thing, so no worries there. We will continue on with some of our questions, and whenever they are able to join us, that would be fantastic. So our next question is, can you tell us a little bit about the history of drag? I think people see it now and have RuPaul's Drag Race as a reference, but we know drag goes back quite a bit further. So I was wondering if you could tell us some history.
Yeah, so I think what's really important to start with to say is, like, I'm not like a history buff on all the drag, but I do think what's really important is knowing a little bit about some of the culture of where your own specific drag comes from. And that's really what I tried to do. I know for me, I tend to always want to point out to people, like, Shakespeare was drag. That was not, that was people dressed in the non-binary performing an art form. And maybe their goal wasn't to, as I said, blur the gender line to create art. Maybe that wasn't what their intention was, but I think that what they were really doing was creating a show. And that's really what drag is. And I think that that's important to really date back to that. But I like to think back to the type of drag that I do and, like, where that history falls into play. I do not consider myself a pageant queen, but I tend to go toward an aesthetic that fits more of that realm of drag, which is really okay with me. I really love that. And I know that there's been a lot of drag pageants that have come through that. And that's really how queens have come up, with that history of what a drag pageant is: Miss Continental, Miss Gay USA. And those have been really strong pillars in our community still to this day. Continental does have a high number of trans women a part of that realm of drag. It tends to be, if you look at a lot of the winners, they tend to be trans women. Whether that's on purpose or not, I don't really know. I think when looking at the history, a lot of that pageant and that scene became about trans women having a space to do drag in a safe way, where it was accepted and appreciated, which I think is really amazing. So I know, like, when I look at the history of drag, I like to look back at where mine kind of comes from, and the aesthetic that I fit in, and that's kind of where I look at it in that sense.
Thank you. Mr. Lloyd, do you want to talk to us a little bit about the history?
Sure. I know, at least for the king sides, a lot of it came from just acting, a lot of acting in the, I want to say, 1970s or 80s, women performing as male gender roles in certain Broadway or theater productions. And I think that's kind of how it kind of steamrolled into what is present day drag for at least some kings. I think that's helped gain popularity with kings a little bit more too.
Thank you. Fauna, can you hear us now? Awesome. So we have Fauna, and we're so excited about that. If you could introduce yourself, what drag means to you, how you got involved in drag, and then if you can tell us your pronouns in drag.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm Fauna Fables. I've been doing drag for 3 years. I have worked in countless states just because military takes me kind of all over the place. Being a military spouse is super fun. Drag means a lot of different things to me. It was kind of getting to be an expression of being intersex. It was kind of getting to express both sides of, like my actual sex and my gender identity. So it kind of gave me like a way to vent out all of those feelings. I got started in drag actually because I was living in a small town in Kansas, and there was no costumers. There was no, like wig artists. There was no like big production people to help build any of these things. And these performers were coming out week after week after week with just these incredible things that they were, just using like pure ingenuity for. So that meant everything to me because I was like, I would love to be able to do that. And here I am years later doing it still. I feel like I missed something, but I am wrong. I'm not sure.
What pronouns do you use when you're in drag?
I am very much so like she, her, they, them. But even out of drag, it's kind of she, her, they, them, he, him. I'm really indifferent as long as you're respectful about it. Like if you're being rude, then I'm just going to be mad regardless. But I'm usually indifferent.
Awesome. And so then we had asked the panelists before you got on here if you could define drag for us.
To me, drag is it is performative gender. It is taking all of the, kind of like how you see, specific genders or lack of genders or, any identity that you can think of, and kind of putting it into an artistic lens and focusing it towards, there's times where you see performers that are like, one day they're hyper femme, the next day that they kind of do something more androgynous or even hyper masculine. It's really just showing like gender through, again, the lens of an artist. That's really kind of the way that I think about it.
Awesome. And then we have had Natalie and Sirloin talk a little bit about the history. Natalie touched on the importance of knowing your own sort of history and where that develops, a little bit of pageant stuff in there, which was some really solid things. And then Sirloin talked to us a little bit about how drag kings sort of evolved from the 70s and 80s. Was there anything you wanted to add to the history of drag?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, of course, touching on its roots in the ball scene, and you kind of touched on that a little bit, Natalie. It really started as a way of communities coming together, and then there's a lot of traditions that even stem even further back. The idea of performing gender goes back all the way to like the Greeks, the Romans, and even back to like original kabuki theater. Even a lot of the shapes that we use in eye makeups, kind of like I was talking with this or about this with Sirloin the other day, that a lot of the shapes that you still see in drag makeup very much so mimic the shapes that are used in kabuki makeup in order to give the expression of one's face. The way that you draw your wing on or the way that you draw your lip on is really indicative of who your character is, what they're feeling, how they are representing themselves as, as a character or, as, your art project. So, you see a lot of like classical art influences in, even in modern day drag. So
Natalie and Bonnie, you both referenced the ball scene. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the ball scene again was a large scene in New York. It was basically kind of where like queer artistry and queer people could come together and know that they were in a safe place with each other. It was a way to show off the artistry and get to be kind of more authentically them. Of course, everyone knows about the show Pose. It's actually a pretty brilliant representation of a lot of the things that trans women have gone through in order to give even the predominantly, unfortunately, cis white male version of drag that we currently see represented. They gave a lot of these people a voice, and that's something that's very important that we talk about remembering our history, and that's a history that I feel like we could continue to push into more people's narrative, yeah.
Just on top of that too, that covered like pretty much it. It's just one of the things that I really take from it is or one thing I like to reference is Paris is Burning. I think that gives a really good representation. It's really connected to Pose. Pose got a lot of its references from Paris is Burning, which was a great documentary on was on Netflix. I don't know what streaming services it is on now for back on there, but another thing that I think is really important to point out with the ballroom scene, which I really love about it, is I think when we think of drag now, a lot of people's minds will go to a performance in a bar that's lip singing, right? Somebody on stage performing, which is beautiful. The ballroom scene was so much more than just a performance. It was fashion. It was like art, which I think we've talked about a lot already. But I think it brings other components to what drag is that aren't just getting on stage and performing, which is great. That's what I do. So I love that, of course. However, I think it really does connect to show people that drag was also more in the ballroom scene. It wasn't so much of doing maybe what you're seeing me do right now. Like out of this, I don't dress or wear makeup like this, right? You would see people as their regular presenting selves with an outfit on that put them in drag, that this is this heightened form of themselves to really showcase that. It also splits it up into categories, which I think is really cool. You compete in these categories that you kind of put yourself in and you bring your best presentation, which I think is really awesome. Really important thing to connect to as well.
And even though the ballroom scene is where we picked up on a lot of, again, like traditional drag and its aesthetics, the ballroom scene is not dead. It is still alive and well, especially like actually one of the winners of Drag Race hosts a ball every single month in Denver still at Trax Nightclub. There's still in Atlanta, where I'm from, there's still so many. I mean, it's actually even more prevalent than the drag scene is there. And I know, I'm pretty sure, Natalie, you could probably comment on this a little more because I believe you're in New York still. I'm pretty sure that the scene is still very evident in New York as well. I'm pretty sure about that.
Yes, it's very much thriving in New York still. And one thing I also just want to mention that voguing really came from the ballroom scene, and I think modern people think of Madonna, which is great. And a lot of people might not know this. Younger people might not know this. She got a lot of backlash for that video because she was really taking from that ballroom culture and not really giving them the credit that they deserved at the time. And I think people now realize that there's also current shows on television. Legendary is a show which is all about voguing in the ballroom scene. I don't know all the judges off the top of my head. I know Meg Thee Stallion judges and a couple other people, but I haven't watched it. But it does depict what performance art is happening in the ballroom scene.
Sir Lloyd, is there anything you would like to add to talking about the ballroom scene?
I mean, honestly, I don't really know a lot about the ballroom scene. I think it's definitely pretty interesting. The only thing I can say is really cool from Pose, but it's super interesting. I'd love to look into more of it. I think especially because in the ballroom scene, I know they have their house mothers. I believe that's still pretty prevalent today. I mean, we have our families. I think that's just one thing I can think of that we take from the ballroom scene today.
Awesome, thanks. I think it's also important to note that the ballroom scene goes back even further than the 1980s. We see the 20s and 30s with the Harlem Renaissance and Black culture really having that. And so there are a lot of really cool pictures out there if folks are interested in looking at it, but it's not, Pose does a really great job of showing that moment in the 80s and Paris is Burning, like folks are saying, but it does go back further. And so if anyone is interested, I super recommend looking into that. Our next question we're going to move on to is, what is something you want people to know about drag?
I mean, for me, there's like so much. I am obsessed with drag. Like, this is everything to me. I've dedicated a whole room in my apartment to it. So I want people to know it all, right? And I think that that's because we unfortunately don't get to see it all. Just with the way it's depicted on television as of now. I think that if you're not a member of the community, you don't get to see some of the other parts of drag that aren't as popularized as had mentioned RuPaul's Drag Race, right? Like that's kind of one sector of what people are seeing. There's so much more to it. But I think when understanding what drag is, like this is drag in general for me, and this is like my point of view of it, is it's just as much for me as it is for you. So like I love drag. I do this for myself. I don't know where I would be if I didn't have it. However, I also do it for like people watching. I want to create a really great experience for people. And I think a lot of performers have that. And I think what's really important is if you're going to a drag show and seeing drag or watching it virtually, give your undivided attention to it, because I think a lot of performers do it for other people just as much as they do it for themselves. Like I said, I don't know where I'd be without it. It's like my biggest hobby. However, it's just also so important. And also, I want people to know about drag. Don't be judgmental about it. It's one of those things that people put so much work into it, regardless of if it's defined as what you think is good drag, it's still good. It's just maybe not your highest interest, and that's okay. Just remember that people put in a lot of work into it, and it's like fun. It's also not to be taken too seriously, right? Like take it seriously, but like have fun with it, play with it. And you'll enjoy it a lot more when you can kind of let that go. I've noticed in my experiences.
I've noticed that a lot of people don't really take a lot of, I think people don't really realize like exactly how much work goes into this. So I currently work full-time in retail, and then I'm also doing drag full-time. I mean, between costume making, restyling wigs, all the makeup, all the, like all of that work. I mean, I'm putting my body through the ringer, on a weekly basis at this point. I mean, Sirloin can attest to the amount of bruises that I leave with every single week. I mean, just how much like pain I'm in after I leave shows, but it's worth it every single time. Another thing that I feel like people don't really realize about drag is that it goes back further than people realize. Like the first documented American drag queen was actually in the 1880s, which was William Dorsey Swan, who was actually an enslaved person who was freed out of Maryland. And they were the first person to be considered the first American drag queen. So we talk about, like the first drag icons, being like, RuPaul and Divine. But really, let's just be honest, those artists go back much further. This has been a long-standing tradition and across multiple different generations. And, it's something that, again, even looking back to old vaudeville shows, I mean, the amount of work that just goes into what we do on a regular basis. I mean, a lot of the people don't realize that while, yes, we are putting on makeup and, hair, I mean, how long did that hair take to style? How long did that costume take to rhinestone? How long did you spend sewing that garment? I mean, and then if you've got a job outside of that, I mean, that's just, you're literally using whatever free time you do have for that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Fauna. There's just a lot of people think, oh, I can lip sync on stage, a wig and heels and make money. Oh, no problem. But I mean, you also have to be your own choreographer, your own makeup artist, your own stylist. And in COVID, your own DJ, your own video editor, cameraman. I mean, oh, there's so much work that goes into it. It's just like an art, literally. But also, I really want the kings. I really want some kings to just shine everywhere. And I want people to know more about kings. I mean, they're just as good as the queens. We don't have to put on heels. I mean, some people do. And some people really rock it. But I mean, we still go through all the same things just to make sure we stay at that level and then we raise it. And I just want, kings, they're just as amazing. And yeah, sorry, I'm stuttering so bad. But yeah, I really want some kings to be more in. I love RuPaul's Drag Race, just that it made drag just mainstream, but the fact that like you have to go all the way, like the very first drag king in Dragula, just it's not as mainstream as much as I'd want it to be.
So that, oh,
Sorry, I'd like to also add that anybody can do drag. Anybody, period. Like this idea that you have to, like, in order to be a queen, you have to be like a mab or assigned male at birth does not mean anything. It is for anybody. Dress how you want to dress. Any expression of gender identity is going to be drag in its own way. As problematic as certain people may be, they were correct when they said we're all born naked and the rest is drag. They were that is a very accurate assessment of everything.
So we touched on queens and kings. Are there other ways or expressions or drag performers that we're not talking about right now?
I know for a couple of people that I'm friends with, they don't identify as drag like kings or queens. They are drag things because they don't want to be specifically gendered, because they want to kind of live outside the spectrum. They're a creature. They're an entity more so than they are anything that's supposed to be predominantly male or predominantly female. And then, I mean, obviously with Dragula, you see the monsters, the things that, again, they're not supposed to be male or female. They're supposed to be that thing that lives under your stairs, or, you know, like that thing in your closet. You know, they want to live outside of a binary, which is becoming even more prevalent through queer culture. Even with a lot of the, or like the mainstream TV shows as well, you're seeing a lot more openness to gender identity.
Yeah, I'm a big person on, like, if I don't know a performer, so like whenever I go into a new city or a new area or just whatever, I will always reference everybody as a drag performer, because I think the term king and queen, while I personally identify myself as a drag queen, that's my own thing that I'm choosing. I think what it really does is it kind of goes toward a binary that we're used to, and that's kind of where it's come from. So I think as and I say we as in a community and people and just in general, become more aware of non-binary individuals or trans individuals or falling into that umbrella with their identities, their drag can easily do that as well. We have to respect that and be aware of that. I know I have a lot of friends that perform in drag that just will say they're drag performers. They don't put king or queen at the end of it for the similar reason that was already stated.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I really don't think you have to assign yourself a gender to do drag. I mean, if you want to go out there and be whatever you want to be, you can be it. There's no one stopping you except yourself.
Thank you. So we are done with our pre-scripted questions. If folks are interested, they can drop them in the Q&A in the webinar, or you can always submit them over Facebook Live. We do have some early pre-submit questions, so we will go through those, but if folks have them, we also want to get to those. So do you have a drag artist you look up to?
I absolutely do. There's people that I worked with back in Kansas. I have to shout out Brianna Jade and Valerie Love. They were really two of the people that got me interested in doing drag and even believing that I could do it in the first place. Like, they gave me the idea that my creativity could be at that level. And then I also have to give a shout out to Eva Destruction. She was on Dragula season 3. She and I grew up in the same town together. I remember when she started doing drag, and to see where she's at now, I mean, the level of versatility. If you want silly and like funny numbers, she can do it. You want beautiful pageantry, she can do it. I mean, you want dark, scary, terrifying, she can do it. That is something that, like, I strive to be as an artist, as somebody that is as nearly as versatile as she is. So I have to give a shout out to those 3 because they are forever my like deepest inspirations.
I have a few, and they range from local people that have just supported me to queens that people have seen on Drag Race and other platforms. I know for me, I started drag through a friend who became my drag mom. And they were just like a really great person to get me into the scene. I will always love and respect what they've helped me do in getting into the scene. As I got more into drag and my own career, there's a queen from Rochester, New York that I think needs to be called out, and her name is Samantha Vega. She has been in the drag scene for a very long time. Pageants, comedy, the whole thing. She sews everything she wears, does all her own hair. She's the reason I sew. She's the reason that my drag kind of elevated. She really pushed me to do more, which I really appreciated. And then additionally, Celeste Larue, who's originally from Vermont, but I met her in Syracuse. She was like a drag mom figure to me, really gave me a lot of great shows and like opportunities, which was fantastic. And again, pushed my drag, always wanted me to do better, wanted to see me succeed, helped me with makeup, all that. And then I really look up to queens, and I name these queens just because they are popularized from RuPaul's Drag Race. Kennedy Davenport and rest in peace, Chi Chi DeVane. They're just two queens that their aesthetic of drag and the way they perform is very similar to what I do. I'm not as intense as those two. I can't be doing the flips like that, but I do high energy numbers like that. That's really what I like my drag to be. And I really look up to them. I mean, and Kennedy was well respected in the pageant scene years before she was on Drag Race. I actually knew about her prior to her being on Drag Race. So those are queens that really have done a lot for my drag. But also not a drag queen, but a drag queen in my eyes, my own mom. A lot of my drag came from her. I remember growing up, big earrings, big jewelry, gaudy, giant hair, the whole thing. Like that was my mother, still is. And I know like a lot of my drag has come from that. It's watching her get ready in the morning, right? For work as a waitress. Like that was really what I loved about drag. She was the first person I told that I was doing it. And she, gave me all the tips and tricks. So yeah.
Yeah, I think first off, I'd like especially to thank Landon Sider, amazing artistry. Oh my goodness, the art and thought and creativity that he puts into every look is just immaculate. But even locally, I can look up to here in Houston, we have Ian Sider Blake, my dad, Richard Long. The way that they can captivate an audience is just like phenomenal to me. And then the most important thing for me, at least, is just how that they hold themselves both in and out of drag so professional, and the way that they do things for their community. I just love that so much. And even here in College Station, Lynn Adonis Blake, what a woman. She's so professional. I just love everything that she does as well. I just think there's so much here locally and in Houston that is just so outstanding.
Thank you.
Shout out to the call out for your mom, because my mom was the first person to ever take me to a drag show. She literally drove me to my first one, so I feel you 100%.
Somebody wrote in the comments that I just need to call out. Somebody said Drag King Idols ? And I know as a queen, I looked up to queens because I was like kind of replicating what they were doing. And I know Sirloin touched upon some kings. Just some New York kings that I really would love to shout out, because when I watch them perform, I see the work they put into it. Rocky Eclipse is a performer out in Syracuse who is phenomenal. And also Hans Oliver, he came up when I did. We like started drag around the same time. And what I really loved about Hans Oliver would do drag across the spectrum. So it wasn't just traditional king drag, would do traditional queen drag. And I'm saying it like that to kind of specify the difference, but really played with drag in general, and was young and really just wanted to be respected and worked really, really hard to get shows, because kings traditionally have a harder time getting booked, specifically, and I'm speaking for New York. I can't speak for around the country, but he really put in a lot of work to make his name respected, and also did a lot by a lot of the hosts. Like would be a curtain, like would pull curtain for queens that were hosting shows when they weren't out in drag, and really just got themselves out there and well respected, which was amazing. So I wanted to shout them out.
I'd like to shout out a few kings too, just out of Atlanta. So there's Mystery Meat, incredible. Out of Kansas City, there's Novocaine. And then, oh gosh, there's Dyke Pence, forever my drag husband till the end of time. Androgen, if you've not seen their artistry, another incredible artist. And then, of course, I'm going to blank on my last one, but there's so many kings. You guys look into the kings. Please, please, please show them the love. They deserve it.
Awesome. So we have 2 questions that were submitted. And so so I know that AFAB drag queens have gained more traction and support in recent years. How can we extend the same support to AMAB drag kings from Cody Taylor?
So in Kansas, I used to run an open show, and I always encourage them, like, I don't care what kind of performer you are. If you feel like you are a drag king, then just claim yourself as a drag king. Or if you feel like you're a drag thing, just claim it. It's hearts, not parts. It's what's here that's more important than it is what's, down there. That should never be a factor in what you get to call yourself as an artist. You are more than, what your, genitals are going to offer. I think that it's silly that it's 2020, we're still having these conversations about, like how gender identity gets to be, how you get to claim yourself as an artist based off of whatever. We need to get out of this misogynistic kind of idea of this is what genders have to be where and what has to be what. It's much more than that now. We are, as a queer community, we're supposed to be this wide spectrum. And I feel like we keep trying to cram ourselves back into this little box. Drag kings have been around again since the ball scene. They used to walk in categories the same as queens would. Drag things were still a thing. There were whole couture categories. So we need to stop, like, Natalie touched on this earlier. I like to be referred to as a drag artist or a drag performer. I don't like to be called a queen per se. If people call me that, I'm not going to be too mad. I'm not too picky, but I typically refer to myself as a performer. So at the end of the day, and that what we all are is performers in our own respect. Why are we leaving people out of part of this community? That's just silly to me.
I agree 100%. I also it's like not my business how you identify. It literally has nothing to do with me. And this conversation about AFAB queens not be, or performers not being, like, it's just like, the whole 2020 thing is like so true. It's like, why are we even having I understand why we're having the conversation, right? Like that I'm getting. The fact that we have to, though, is what I'm just like, what? It's very interesting to me. The one thing I always say I want to see from a drag performer is effort. I just want to see you have fun. I want to see you put in the work and have fun and do the damn thing. Like, that's all I really care for. I've had friends that are like, can you put me up in drag, like just the makeup? And I'm like, yeah. And when I'm done, I'm like, let's put you in pants and get you in a show. And they're like, oh my God, I couldn't. I'm like, why not? Why not? Right? Like, and I think that that's great that they're trying to respect drag and thinking that I understood where they were coming from. However, I think it's really important just to know that, like, I don't know how you identify. It's not my business either. It's as long as you're having fun and making and respecting the form of like the art form, like that's really how I look at it. And like I said, it's effort. Just put in effort and enjoy yourself. And if you need help, let me know. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how can I help you out? Like, you want me to style a wig? I will. You want me to make a costume? I will. As long as you're having fun.
Yeah, I completely agree with both of them. I think true drag fans really shouldn't care about what's in a performer's pants. They should just care what they're going to perform. and how amazing they are. Like, we don't need to know your business. If you want to go out and perform, do it. Like, it's really that simple.
I'd like to shout out some AFAB performers and AMAB performers. So actually there's a guy out of, again, Kansas. Sorry, I've lived in Kansas, so that's going to be most of my reference. So his name is Raphael. He started showing up to my open shows every single week. And you want to talk about the most incredible AMAB performer. I mean, just showed up, always had great costuming. Like, again, you said, put in the effort and have fun. And that's what he did every single time. And then shout out to Jesse B. Darling locally here at Texas A&M. Incredible AMAB performer. Absolutely stunning. One of the funniest human beings I've ever seen in my entire life. Love, 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 love. And then even more widely known, Hollow Eve, who was on Dragula. And then Creme Fatale out of, I believe, LA. You Want It's Makeup Artistry, Creme Fatale is chef's kiss. Incredible. Like, these people have just as much talent as everyone else. Just acknowledge it and don't worry about what they've got down below. You know, that's just so unimportant.
Yeah, I have to say there's one performer out here in Albany, Ruby Madness, who puts, like, when I say puts an effort, like, puts me to shame. And I think I do a pretty good job. Like, everything is very, very well thought out, from like hair to costume to makeup to like the performance itself. Like, that is really what gets me, is the performance itself is very well thought out. Phenomenal.
All right, so our last question is, what originally interested you in drag, and how has your view of drag and drag culture changed as you've become more immersed in the community?
I would actually like to start by saying I did not want to do this. Which is funny. So growing up, I come from a family that is very, I am Mexican and Italian. So the ideals of gender to me were very specific. Men did men things. That's was very prominent in both of my sides of my family. So even just being gay was like taboo in general. And then I went to college and saw drag, and I was an athlete my whole high school experience. So I had a more physically large build. And I went to a drag show, loved it. We went out to the local gay bar there to see another show the following week. And I was dancing just on the dance floor, and the host came up to me and was like, "Why don't you do drag?" And I was like, "Oh no, I don't do that. Like, I'm not." I was like, I have facial hair. I'm too broad. I'm too much of like a dude, and that's really how I said it. And then that like summer, I like reached out to them. I was like, I want to try it. I want to try it. I want to give it a go, because it stuck with me that they had said I should do it. That ended up becoming my drag mom, Mackenzie Taylor. We all sound like we're in the witness protection program, but yeah, Mackenzie Taylor. And then I look at how I looked at drag then and how I look at it now, and it's so different. I really went into drag thinking I had to be really hyper feminine, and that was the only way drag was done. And that was just because that's what I was seeing in the local scene I was at, which was fine. I loved it. And I did stick to that. I'm not going to sit here and say that I didn't. I did stick to that type of drag because I liked it. Respect for different types of performers as my drag increased, because I think the way it was presented to me was that certain types of drag were lazy. Because there was no padding, or people weren't shaving, or what have you. And I never really had a problem with it. I was like, doesn't really bother me, but like, okay, I hear what you're saying. And then when I would see that person perform, it wasn't lazy, it was strategic, right? I think I started to connect the look of drag and the performance of drag together more, even though they maybe didn't match the way I thought they should have. And I think that's when I really started to fall in love with drag. Because I think what it made me do was love my drag more for what I was doing, and made me want to put more effort into what I was doing in drag, whatever that was at the time. I also always said when I started, I don't care if my makeup's not good, because I was like, I was a comfortable performer. I was like, I can dance. So like, I'd be comfortable on stage dancing. If my makeup's not that great, who cares? And then just as time went on, I was like, I want to feel pretty. Like, I want to look at it and say, this looks good today. Not just like, I'm okay with this. And I think that that's really like a big change because my name out of drag is George, and Natalie made me love George more because I became more comfortable in it, because my drag was evolving and my idea of drag was evolving. But yeah.
It's so funny how similar and yet absolutely different our experiences are. Again, I started in drag because I saw, like, again, living in a small town, having, performers that didn't have all the resources, just flourishing and blossoming and making these incredible performances and artists, but I had the advantage of being a hair and makeup artist for a long period of time ahead of time. So the look was there a lot faster than a lot of other performers, but the performance was where I struggled because I was so uncomfortable on stage, and I was very nervous, and, I knew I looked good, but I just didn't know how to translate it. And then you were talking about how, like, you started even with, like, having like a little bit more body and a little bit more pads and a little bit more, I own pads. I never use them because I know that I can't do half of the stuff I can do performance wise if I have them on. They're more a hindrance than they are a help for me. Like, I do, anyone who's seen me perform, I do a lot of like splits, back bends, like kicks, like a lot of like very contortionist-esque movement. And it's very hard to do that when you've got like 4 layers of foam around you. But I never had an issue or had like any problems with anyone else's drag because I was too worried about my own. I was like, you know what? They may not be the most beautiful. And I'm like, but I'm sure that they buck the house down. I'm sure that they are the best dancer possible. And I'm like, yeah, they may not, be the best performer, but look at the way that they look. You can always looking at Natalie and I'm looking at myself, I'm like, if you'd have told me 2 years ago that I'd be a great performer, I'd be like, okay, sure. And looking at Natalie, I'm like, I'm sure that there were times where you looked at yourself and were like, I'm going to be beautiful. And you'd be like, oh, okay, sure. And, now now looking at ourselves, we get to kind of move into like loving all that, but I mean, really drag has meant everything to me. It really I didn't find out that I was intersex until I was in my 20s, which of course explained a lot about my life early on. I'm 5'5". I'm never going to get any taller. I've never been able to build muscle. I've never had a deeper voice than this. People think that this is my drag voice. And I'm like, no, this is just what I sound like. But it kind of gave me an outlet to kind of like express both the, like the actual masculine and feminine sides of who I am. So it just meant so much to me to have the opportunity, and then being afforded the opportunity to be a performer on so many levels has, given me so much room to grow, even as Zachary, or, even just like in my relationship with like my, my partner. It just has really given me the opportunity to really be, a better person overall, get involved in more causes, get involved in the queer community more, get more ideas out there, even just the weird, stupid thought I have at midnight that I make a whole mix about because I've got nothing better to do. It really has just given me an outlet to do every bit of art that I've ever wanted to do. So.
Yeah, again, I think I started out just watching a drag show. And I was like, wow, Little Faith, that's me out of drag, is probably the quietest person you can ever meet. But for some reason, Sirloin, like, it's a way for me to express like how, I can actually be really like bold. I can do these things. Like, why not? It just gives me a way to, I guess, act as a character, to try new things and get out of my bubble. And I think it's really helped Faith come a long way as well. Yeah, I think Sirloin, I was never good at dancing, but boy, Sirloin can sure show you how he can try. Like, he's probably the most adorable little thing you ever see. And I love him so much, but without Sirloin, I would be nowhere near where I am today as a year ago.
All right, so we got one question I wanted to ask really quick, and so we're just asking for one tip. But any advice for a budding drag performer on a budget?
Hit that thrift store. I will be completely honest. Sirloin and I went the other day, and I'm telling you, you can look at something and be like, that is the ugliest garment I've ever seen. I guarantee you try it on, you'll love it. Guaranteed. To this day. And rhinestones are cheap.
I like thrift stores, yes, but like an old bed sheet. Get some rhinestones from Walmart, the little fake plastic ones, glue them on. No one's gonna know, and no one's gonna care. So, like I said, as long as you are having fun, as long as you're having fun. Also, not cheap, but cheap in the long run on a budget. Learn to sew, and yes, a sewing machine's expensive. You can get them cheap, secondhand. However, if a seam doesn't look good, rhinestone it. Like, no one is going to know, promise. Like, there's ways to do it. I started doing my own drag. I made the outfit I'm currently wearing. I kid you not, it has saved me so much money because these girls are charging, I go to Queens, like personally, like $400 for a leotard that I can make with bed sheets.
Yeah, no, I just found out about the beauty that thrift stores are. Oh my gosh, I never knew that I could get so many things that nobody wanted, but Sirloin can use it. But I mean, even for kings just starting out that are definitely on a budget, I probably maintain my good gear on what is it? Spirit Halloween? No, Party City, bow ties and suspenders. That got me through a year, and I have like 5 different colors.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all of our panelists for coming and speaking here tonight. If you enjoyed what we did, we still have a few programs going on here in the center. On November 20th, we will have the Trans Day of Remembrance Vigil. That's going to be at 6 p.m. on our live stream. After the vigil, immediately, we will be having a Zoom room space for folks that will be run by the LGBTQ Professional Network and Aggie Pride LGBTQ Network. For our students who are going to be going through exams here soon, we will be having Rainbow Relaxin' Days return. It'll be a hybrid program, and so we will be providing you with free craft supplies, and you just have to put in the effort. We'll be having knitting kits, painting kits. We're going to make some gingerbread people, and some snowflake decorating, and much, much more. So thank you so much for our performers. If folks have questions, you can put them in Facebook Live, and we might be able to answer some of those, okay? Thanks, y'all, and have a good evening.